Are hunters murderers? Is the U.S. government in business with the cartels at the southern border? And what do mass shootings all have in common? All that and more coming up on Gabbers. Welcome to Gabbers. This is the show that believes in free speech, original thought, and a desire for truth. I am Rusty Putfark in one of my favorite places. We're on location today. And here with Meme Joe Green. How are you today, Meme Joe?
Man, doing great. Georgia, the weather's perfect.
We are at an undisclosed location in Georgia with Horny Hank here. Horny Hank caused all kind of chaos on Gab last week.
You became public enemy number one, I think.
Half and half.
Yeah, it was 50-50.
It was about 50-50, but yeah, we had Andrew Torba reposted a Gab that I put up about my relationship with Horny Hank here and him being a beautiful animal on the wall, and it blew up, and most people thought it was great. It's a very nice buck, and other people, I was called everything from natural born killer to murderer to other things that I can't say. So I thoroughly enjoyed it. I enjoyed the funny craziness, the people that can say ridiculous stuff like that.
I thought you were going to read some mean tweets or whatever today, because the funniest ones to me were the ones where they were like, why don't you get your food from the grocery store?
Yeah, exactly.
I like that kind of thing.
Exactly. Yeah, because they don't kill animals at the grocery store.
That's right. And then the funny thing was, then people were replying back to the trolls that were replying to you.
Oh my gosh.
And they were like, you idiot, you don't know where
I had to kind of leave
from?
that conversation because it was just going on and on and on. And I kind of like backed out. I just said,
it was crazy.
You know, the people that congratulated me, I was like, this is great. And the others that wanted to say their little 2 cents, their uneducated 2 cents, or their emotional feeling 2 cents. Hey, that's the beauty of Gab. You can be as dumb as you want, or you can be as intelligent as you want. It's whatever you want to do.
I had more fun kind of watching the people that came to your defense. And they were
they
were janking on people saying, oh, you've got all these McDonald's food bags in your back of your post, and you're messing with him about the deer.
Yeah, there was a guy from London who called me a name that we can't say on here, and I saw his profile picture. That dude was no way a vegetarian,
No way
whatsoever. So if he wants to claim that, like I said, that's cool. Gab, that's the great beauty about Gab, is it offers you the platform to express yourself freely. And you know what? People that are against hunting, I'm cool with that. That's fine. There's a lot of people that appreciate it and can do it on a managed level. That's great. And that's good.
Oh, I get
Happy
it.
for them.
Look, I mean, I understand it. I mean, also we grew up, watching Bambi and things like that. And then we hear all these stories, and Americans are really good at putting kind of human personalities to animals.
Yeah.
But if you really knew probably what this deer was thinking the whole time, or how he would treat you if he was a human, I'm just saying, animals are animals.
Well, you're not a hunter.
Well, I was for many years, because I was a starving college student, hunted, fished, did whatever we had to do to put food on the table. And that was basically our grocery store. We would go and we would hunt and we would fish, and whatever we could catch or kill, that plus some ramen noodles. I think they're 12 cents now. They were probably 5 cents back then. And so that's how we ate.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I've got just again, we're here in the pursuit of truth. So here's an article talking about how hunting serves the environment by controlling overpopulation. So I don't hunt because I'm here to control the population. I hunt because I enjoy the sport. I love to have the meat. I love to eat it myself. I love to give it away to other people that thoroughly appreciate meat. And so hunting is controversial. That's what this article says. As a recreational sport, hunting is considered reprehensible by some. I discovered that. The issues are pretty thorny and heated. That's absolutely right. But a new study may provide some useful middle ground. Researchers found when it comes to problematic abundance, hunters may serve their ecosystem well. By regulating populations, hunting may help regulate the environment. And then a Cornell University agriculture and life sciences professor and research partner, Paul Curtis, says, hunting can help, but it is often not even enough to control the damage wrought by animal overpopulation. White-tailed deer, horny Hank, are a prime example. In the northeastern U.S., this burgeoning population is diminishing biodiversity. These deer eat native trees, wildflowers that other animals rely on, but hunting has not been able to even reduce the impact of that. But he says hunting can help reduce the damage in rural, that's a hard word to say, rural areas. They may come close to stabilizing deer numbers, but won't control them. Without a doubt, legalized hunting is one of the most cost-effective tools for maintaining wildlife populations in check that lend themselves to harvest. That was a guy from Texas A&M University. And then back to the Cornell Curtis researcher. It's questionable whether there will be enough hunters in the future to really manage wildlife populations. He talks about the health benefits for humans. In Texas, the annual deer harvest averages 450,000 animals, providing up to 14 million pounds of boneless venison, which is much leaner than beef. And they go into some things about wild boar, which is a very, very detrimental and damaging species. But even up here, where we're at, these things eat crops. They are very dangerous. They'll run out in front of your truck. And I have a buddy that had just 23 deer claims. You don't hit them. Sometimes they run into the side of your vehicle.
But you're talking about the hogs and that type of stuff too. I mean, the deer and the hogs, I mean, they do destroy a lot of farmland. So, hey, vegetarians, we're saving your crop too.
Yeah.
But,
plants have feelings.
Yeah, right. Is it more ethical to let one starve, to have overpopulation, and to let them starve out there?
It's actually interesting that you said that, because I read a snippet from PETA who said that hunting is not a very great way to control populations. And it's unfortunate that animals starve and suffer, but it's part of the chain that the strong survive. Starvation is, that's crazy.
Well, but see, I see that same theme going all the way across the environmental movement too, because as a forester, I hear that, we're the demons for harvesting timber, for cutting timber, right? Whether you're thinning it, whether you're managing it, and of course a clear cut. I mean, that's the all-time worst ever, even though it's more beneficial for some species because, the other trees can't live under partial sun. So you clear cut for a certain reason. Well, that's all part of management. That's all part of when a forest gets overgrown and unmanaged, what do you see? You see what you see out there out west with the uncontrolled wildfires. Now everything's burning up. Now you're destroying wildlife habitat. Now you're destroying houses and where people live. And but they'll say that's part of the natural ecosystem.
But not only that, you have insect damage.
Oh yeah.
That can just wipe out everything.
Yeah. Because it's not being managed properly. We were put on this earth to manage the natural resources. And granted, we see a lot of maybe overdevelopment in Florida. I'll be the first to say, I think there's a little bit too much of that. But now look at the environmental movement. We're starting to put up wind turbines everywhere. We're starting to put up solar panels everywhere. I mean, I personally have harvested plenty of timber in areas that will never be timber ever again. All that forest that you guys claim that you love, all those trees that you love, now it's a permanent solar farm, you know, or it's developments, it's houses, it's gated communities, it's shopping centers. I always think we get demonized for not being the environmentalists, but I feel like we are the true environmentalists. Why do I want less trees? That hurts my ability to make a living. I want more trees. I want people managing timber. I want people growing more trees.
Well, there's a report, I can't cite exactly where the source was, but basically that the earth is more green right now than it was 30 years ago. So it's actually the vegetative state of the earth is in a better position.
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know about that now. I mean, if you had asked me 20 years ago, I would have said for sure, because there was, back in the day, our timber industry used to plant trees. We used to manage, big companies would manage large forests. And then you had timberland investment groups, investment groups like that. They would take on large, big green projects, and they would manage the forest. And as a result, you saw more turkeys, more wildlife, more deer, a healthier wildlife population, more diversity, that type of stuff. But the environmental movement just demonized the timber industry so bad that they were just like, well, forget this. We don't need this. We got shareholders that hate us. We'll outsource this to private individuals. We'll sell all of our timberland. So they divested so much of their timberland. And then they just said, well, we'll just have our mills. We'll open up the doors. Whoever wants to bring it to us, we'll pay them for it. But we don't need the headache of all of this bad environmental PR about how awful we are. Yeah. So now what you see is now all of that land that was being managed and controlled is now in the hands of private developers and that type thing. And what happens? Boom, housing development, shopping centers, roads, everything. And now is it better? Are we better off? I don't know.
Well, part of the amazingness of having this location is we have a train that comes by quite frequently,
about every 5 minutes.
So we're just going to roll with it because it's coming by right now. And that's the beauty of this. But I mean, as far as when you look back at hunting and, you know, loving the environment and trying to care for your environment, it's all part of, like you said, proper management. And I mean, as far as the hunting goes, like I even responded to some of those comments. I don't shoot a deer unless I know I've got a clear shot and that it will humanely be taken, that it will not suffer whatsoever. I don't believe in that. I don't believe in hurting animals. And I don't believe in doing it just for the heck of it, just because of that. I wouldn't do it if I don't. I would like to hunt ducks, but I don't eat ducks. I think ducks are gross. So I don't hunt ducks. I hunt pheasants. I love to eat pheasants. They're great. Ducks aren't my thing, so I don't hunt them. But again, I think there's a proper way to do it. There's an ethical way to do it. And that's what we enjoy doing. So
I remember as a kid growing up, you know, as kids grow up, we always had guns everywhere. I mean, that wasn't a thing. We had guns in corners of our house. Everybody had guns. We put guns in the rack of our pickup truck. Didn't even lock the door. No one would steal it. And so just growing up around guns, growing up out in the country, growing up hunting, that type of thing. I can remember one time I shot just a regular bird, some type of bird in a tree. And my granddad, man, he read me the riot act. He told me, he said, well, he goes, you feel pretty good about yourself now just for killing? You just killed something just to kill it? Are you going to eat it?
Yeah.
And I was like, no, don't plan to eat it. I said, well, why did you want to kill it? Why did you want to take its life? And that kind of set the rest of my direction for that point on. If I was not going to eat it, it was not for a purpose. You know, I didn't need a trophy. I didn't need any of that type of stuff, you know, but if I wasn't going to eat it, I wasn't going to kill it. But, you know, when we were starving and trying to put ourselves through college, you know, that was our grocery store.
And it's great meat.
And I don't need that anymore. And this is my own personal choice, but I like to eat deer meat, but I don't need it. And I just don't particularly hunt. Also, if I'm working in the forest for so many years and all throughout the day, when people say, hey, what do you want to do on the weekend? It's not go out in the nature anymore. I want to go in the air conditioning.
Yeah. Well, I get to work in the air conditioning too much. So I enjoy that. And I enjoy just the peace of sitting out there and just enjoying the wildlife, and in the morning watching the woods wake up, in the evening watching the woods go to sleep, and just, I mean, there's plenty of deer that walk by. You just don't bang away at every single deer that walks by. I mean, there's plenty that you can just watch and observe, and it's neat. I mean, it's a great thing. And there's some, and when you put game cameras out, there's certain deer that are very mature and that you need to take out because they'll overbreed, and sometimes they'll introduce weak genetics at their older age. And then you also want to give the chance for some of these young bucks to come up and make their mark. But they're interesting. They're an interesting animal. Like you said, they can be huge bullies to other ones. I mean, there was a big deer that I saw on camera, because I put cameras out and have video recording, and man, they'll run them off and try to, you know, gouge them. And they're not calm animals like you see.
They're wild animals.
They are wild animals, and they're interesting, but
they taste good.
They do taste good. They do taste good.
I noticed you were eating a lot of deer jerky earlier.
I am. I've got some deer jerky right here. This actually is from Horny Hank.
You're asking for it now.
I know.
You're going to actually put this here next to him.
Yeah, he doesn't care.
You're going to get so many mean tweets now.
He doesn't care. I'm just saying that I'm here because I eat this stuff. It's great.
you're going to get so much hate mail.
That's fine. I mean, it's fine. But speaking of hate mail and violence, let's talk about the border.
The border. The border is out of control. The border is definitely out of control. And, it's always been a mess down there. You know that. I mean, there's no great way to deal with that situation in there. What do we have, like 2,000 miles of border between U.S. and Mexico?
Maybe,
Yeah, I think it's something like that. And, it's always been a problem down there. And look, let's just be clear. If I lived anywhere but America, especially some of the countries that border America or even south of that, or even around the world, I would definitely be trying to come here.
Sure.
Makes sense, right? I would want that for my family, and especially if it was dangerous or it was violent but I think what we've discovered is most people are really coming over for economic reasons. They're starving, there's no opportunity for them to make a living. Here, America has always represented the land of opportunity.
I'm not sure they're starving.
Not starving.
Have you seen some of the pictures of some of the people crossing the border? One of them said it was this lady who was, let's just say, had a comorbidity, which obesity's this huge comorbidity. She was pretty big, and they said something about she was starving. So I'm not sure all of them are starving, and I'm not sure all of them legitimately are coming here for a noble cause in the sense of they're fleeing something. I think that there's a lot of free here, and like someone said, it's hard to beat out Santa Claus. So when you can come here and get free healthcare, free housing, free education, free everything, you're going to come. Whether it's, I mean, I'm not saying that there's not unique circumstances of people that are legitimately trying to seek asylum from something that is detrimental, but I don't think that's the majority of what's going on.
That's with any group. I mean, you can't have this many people and not have a few bad actors. You're going to.
I mean, they all have Biden t-shirts.
Well, I don't know. I mean, Biden,
you can't make that up.
Biden's 80 million voters didn't wear Biden t-shirts. So I think it's kind of ironic that people crossing the border are wearing them.
Yeah. Yeah.
So anyway, here's really what happened. And in previous episodes, I think we talked about this. I asked the question, who put out the memo for unaccompanied minors to start coming across? Used to, it was families, you remember? And they were always saying, okay, look at how terrible the Trump administration is. They're ripping families apart at the border. And that was the big talking point in the news. So, that news narrative had to change under Biden because he can't continue to do the same thing that Trump was doing. So they obviously had to put out some type of memo to say, hey, don't do it that way because you're forcing us to have to do the same thing that Trump did. So we got to change the way this is coming across because the optics are terrible. So I figured it out this week on what really happened. And it all has to do with a Title 42 exemption. If you don't know what Title 42 is, it's like a U.S. code of how we handle health and human services, that type of thing, civil rights, that type of thing. Well, under Title 42, and it was to also prevent the spread of COVID. I think that was a very controversial thing that Trump did as well. I think it was March of 2020, where we're saying, okay, you can't just have people flooding over the border because we got this COVID crisis and we can't manage that. So any unnecessary travel across the border, what was I don't know the exact term, non-essential travel, I think is what it's called, across the border has to be restricted. Well, that just was demonized like crazy. That's terrible. Oh, you just don't want people coming across.
Racist, xenophobic.
All the labels you can put on it.
Yep.
That gets put on it. So what happened is if you tried to cross the border under Trump, and say you were from Mexico, you're the direct country that borders the U.S., and you come in or you attempt to come in under Title 42, you would be held in Mexico, not in the U.S., but you'd be held in Mexico. All the processing, you could try to seek asylum there, and however long that takes. Then if you do get a court date, then you can come in specifically for the court date, but you're not going to be released into the U.S. Well, under Oh, and now, if you were from, say, Honduras or some country that wasn't directly connected to America, now then you'd be processed in the U.S. and not in Mexico. They're not gonna hold a Honduran in Mexico for processing. They're gonna.
But I thought you could only claim asylum in the first country that you
that's
made
true.
it to before, because so you can't be from Guatemala and go through Mexico and claim asylum in the United States.
I do remember him saying that, and that is something probably I need to look back into to see if that's truly the way it's supposed to happen.
Mm-hmm.
But the way the laws are written and the way the laws are enforced are always two different things.
Sure.
So what Title 42 was doing was it was keeping people in Mexico. Well, if you are going to pay a coyote, you're going to pay a cartel or somebody to get you into America. How much are you going to pay if you don't make it to America? You're going to get stuck in Mexico. Not that much.
Yeah.
But if all of a sudden now there's an exemption, and here's what the exemption was. As soon as Biden got into office, he made this exemption. And it is, if you're an unaccompanied minor, then, you're going to get through. So in other words, he was like, okay, guys, don't force us. The optics are going to be so terrible. Don't force us to have to separate families at the border. We're going to create an exemption so that you guys do the dirty work in Mexico or wherever. You separate yourself, send the unaccompanied minors over, and then we'll process you here in America and possibly release you in America because we know you're going to come back for your court date. You're not just going to disappear, right?
Sure. Yeah.
So,
everyone comes back for their court date.
So think about that. If you're going to pay a cartel, you're going to, tens of thousands of dollars. That's hard for me to come up with tens of thousands of dollars. How do people that don't make that much money in Mexico or wherever are going to come up with that type of money? That's a lot. That's life savings that these people are going to put in the hands of cartels to get them across the border. But it's probably worth it if you're actually going to make it to America. So that created a whole new business arrangement that has much more value than it did without the exemption.
But that cost also introduces sex trafficking. Because there's a lot of people that can't afford $10,000, so they'll trade their children to make up that debt. I've been in other countries. I've been in, as a matter of fact, in Honduras, where you had a mother sell her daughter to a dump truck driver for a cell phone. She was freaking out. She wanted her daughter back, but she traded that for us. So sex trafficking is, I think, up over 1,000% at the border. And that is a direct impact of what you're talking about, Title 42. It's a direct impact of the policies of this administration. I won't put any adjectives before that, but this administration. And it's a true tragedy because, you have, you're going to probably get into the numbers and the increase, but it's sick. It's absolutely sick of what's going on. And they're talking about $3,500 per kid as far as that they'll sell on them. That's the going rate right now at the border.
See, this makes me so mad is that you're putting this policy is putting parents in the situation where they're basically having to, for the good of the kid, possibly the ultimate good of the kid, if they ultimately make it to America. But what are they going to think about having to let your kid go into the hands of cartels? You don't think bad stuff's happening to them? You don't think that that's a humanitarian nightmare? You don't think that terrible things are happening to these kids along the way? And I can't even imagine. I don't even want to know what type of atrocities are happening as a result of this change in policy. So now you're putting all these kids in the hands of these cartels, but
I'll tell you what's sick. What's sick is that this administration will use that and will use people, human lives, and souls to promote their own political agenda. That's reprehensible, and I hope and I pray that investigations will get into what this is for, because now they're talking about flying him up near the Canadian border. All they're trying to do is reseed different populations as far as for their political gain.
Well, in a lot of these states,
disgusting.
A lot of these states, even the governors, aren't even included in the memo that, hey, guess what? We're going to take over the K. Bailey Hutchinson Center or something like that in Dallas. All of a sudden they find out that 3,000 teenagers are going to be housed in the K. Bailey Hutchinson Convention Center
Mm-hmm.
for up to 90 days, that, or whatever. That's at least the time frame that they're saying, kind of like the 2 weeks to, slow the curve. Once something like that starts, that never ends. But now we're bringing in immigrants, teenagers. We're going to put them into this convention center. We're spending just billions and billions and billions of dollars on this. It's costing America. It's costing something one way or another.
Mm-hmm.
But under, like when Obama was in, his criteria for a border crisis was 1,000 people attempting to cross the border a day.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know what it is now? 6,000. 6 times the number of people are trying to cross the border in a day. And that's just what we know about.
But it's not a crisis.
But it's not a crisis. It's a challenge. So they've basically about broken the thesaurus trying to find new words for a crisis. But think about this. That's just pretty much what we know about it. I mean, that's all this is just estimates. I went on a police ride along not too long ago where we live. And it was interesting. There were some things that happened on that I had no idea happens. So if you had, say, 7 to 10 officers covering this one area of the city, and all of a sudden you arrest somebody, then they have to take the people to wherever the jail is. Could be 30 minutes away, 45 minutes away, an hour away, depending on how far away you are in the county. You got to take them to the county detention center. Well, that takes one of those officers out of the field fighting crime. Well, look at the border. You've only got so many border patrol officers. So if you tie them up with crossings, and you can even make like a big showing, okay, we're crossing here, we're crossing here, we're crossing here, and all the attention goes there. Well, guess what's left unattended?
A lot of miles.
And you don't think the cartels are trained?
Sure.
They're military trained.
Bait and switch.
Oh, these guys are professionals. They really know. I mean, these guys have got like severe military type training.
Yeah.
So they know all the tactics. They know all the strategies to tie up the border control, overwhelm them, and then slip them through however. I mean, these guys are smart. So anyway, that tells you that the numbers are probably drastically even more than we even know. So what do we not know about? And these cartels now, from the statistics that we got off I guess it was Homeland Security or HHS, cartels are making $14 million a day smuggling. $14 million a day. You don't think that, and you get what you pay for. Whatever you incentivize, you get more of. Whatever you disincentivize, you get less of.
Mm-hmm.
Seems like a pretty good incentive to me to keep that business going.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. And again, it goes back to, this is all intentional ignorance is what it is. Or
I don't know. There's
ineptitude.
But I'll just say for Americans and even a lot of the friends I have, their heart's in the right place. You can see what's going on in other countries. And if you've ever traveled, and I know you have and I have, we've traveled to other countries, and you just want something better for people. You really do. You see them, they don't have the opportunities. They're never going to have much of a life. However, how we define what's good and bad and success is not always should be monetary, but just the living conditions, the health conditions, that type thing. You want better for them. Well,
and it kind of goes back to being a deep thinker and a critical thinker and understanding what it is, because when we've traveled to foreign countries and seen poverty on a scale that doesn't exist here, the first thing you want to do is Americanize it, or to get them out of that situation and bring them here, or just do what the U.S. would do and make rules and regulations against that. When we were in Honduras, we were working in a trash dump community, and there was a school, and a lot of kids were working in the trash dumps. Of course, that's not a good thing, but when they work and find those recyclables, they get around $1 a day, which that helps them eat and all that. So one of the things that when we met with the vice president of Honduras, we were there with a couple of other high profile people, and part of the contingent that I was in kind of piped up and said, well, Mr. Vice President, we're asking you to make a law that won't allow kids to be in trash dumps. I was kind of a videographer and part of this team, and it probably wasn't my position, but I piped up and I said, we can't do that. And the whole table went silent and like, why? I said, this isn't the United States. There's not a Department of Children's Services. if these kids are banned from going into trash dumps, they will starve. They will not get $1 a day. There's other baby steps you can do to make their time there less or to supplement that time, but to just create a law to ban them from being there, they'll literally starve. There's no place in Honduras where the government is sending welfare checks or anything like that. It doesn't happen. And so thankfully they didn't do that and common sense prevailed. But I think so much we see that and we just assume the world has the same foundation that we have here. And it doesn't exist. So there's a lot of things you have to do as far as thinking through certain circumstances and situations that if you make rash decisions on something, it could negatively affect and cost people their lives. And those kids literally would have starved. They did some research and they came back and they said, thank God you said that, because literally kids would have been banned from that. Their parents are making $1 a day themselves. Now it's going to be a choice. They're all going to starve together, or what are they going to do? So there was kind of an effort made at that point where a lot of people would get together and then they would pay those families $1 a day per child to not allow them to go to the dump, but to go to the school. Mm-hmm. And so then it got to the point where now they were having an education, but it has to be supplemented some way, and the government wasn't doing that. So we had to create a private funding entity to make that happen. So I think people just make random rules and laws, and some of these things I see people make, I'm like, have you not thought through any of this? And they haven't. They just make it because in their stereotypical circumstance, that's what they think is right.
Well, and like I said, going back to a lot of friends that I have, their heart's in the right place. They care for the people that are dealing with issues, and they're, this whole topic of the border. I've had some fairly heated discussions with people that really thought I was like the worst because I didn't believe that we should just open up our borders. As Christians, we shouldn't just be like thinking, okay, well, we need to be ministering to all these people, let them come in and we'll minister to them. That's the gospel. That's what we're supposed to be doing. We're not supposed to be like blocking and going, okay, we've got ours and you can't have access to things that are better. We're hoarding all of our wealth and we're just not letting people over. But going back to critical thinking, like what you were saying just a minute ago, if you really think, okay, well, where does this lead? Okay, let's open up the borders. Where does that lead to? Play that scenario out. Mm-hmm. You don't do it in your home.
Nope.
Let's just take a practical example. We'll just take it right here to you personally. If you believe that we should have open borders, then number one, why do you have fences? Why do you have gates? Why do you have locks on your house? Why do you have an alarm system? Why do you have Nest cameras? Why do you have any of that when everybody is so non-threatening? Everybody is so here for, genuine humanitarian reasons. Open up your house, open up your doors, open up your car, give them your whatever, access to everything, your refrigerator. Mm-hmm. And let's say that, one family shows up. Okay, you can handle that. Okay, you're being great. You're going to let one family come in and stay with you, and you're going to give them access to your resources. But then what happens when the second family shows up, and the third, and the fourth, and word gets out, hey, if you come over here, you get everything. At what point do you run out of the ability to house and feed and take care of people?
Yeah.
And the same thing, America cannot handle the whole world coming here. We'll overrun every system we've got. So there has to be some type of orderly system.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you're exactly right. Going back to that, I have some friends that lived in Austin, Texas, on the 20-something floor of a building, were huge advocates for opening the border and letting everybody in, for sympathetic, humanitarian, all these things. I asked them, I said, do you really believe exactly what you preach? We should have open borders. Absolutely. I say, take the door off your hinges. Huh? Take the door off your hinges. And you go to the board and you tell them to remove the security guards that are waiting down there in the beginning. So take the door off your hinges. That's your start today. Let everybody have free reign into your place. They would be tenants at that point, but take your doors off. No, they're not going to do it because it's easier to do that. It's always easier to be generous with other people's money until it's yours. It's generous to be with other people's borders until it's your border. But that's the thing, because it's like it just doesn't. the United States is the most generous country as far as going and serving and distributing. And when anytime there's a crisis, we're there. So I don't think you can say it's a humanitarian issue that we're failing to live up to, because we've stepped up every time that we've been called on. And even when we're not called on, all around the world, people from the church are always going and doing and serving and loving and giving. But to allow this to happen, the biggest issue is not all of them are good people. Not all of them are just people that want to come here and make a better life. There's a lot of criminal activity. And when you look at the border, there was the sheriff of one of the counties that were close to the border encouraging everyone to get guns, because the amount of robberies and murder that's happening is through the roof. And that's only going to increase the more that's open and you're not vetting anyone. They're not even checking them for any disease. COVID, that's the least of the worries, but you're going to have Ebola walking through. You're going to have a lot of these things, because how are people getting here? It's not just people from Mexico that are doing that. They're flying from the Middle East to Mexico and then crossing that way. That's been well documented. So
what you're talking about is an unorderly system, but we always forget that we actually have an orderly system.
We do.
Whether it's too slow, whatever, you can criticize it any way you want, but we technically have an immigration system. What we're witnessing here at the border is the violation of our immigration system. And that system is set in place, and it's got a certain steps and orders. It's not so easy to get in. And so I feel terrible for the people that have been going through the right steps, have been going through the right process.
They're furious about it.
Are they?
Yeah.
Because I have not seen a ton of reports on it, but I can imagine they are, because imagine yourself. Let's say that you go to Walmart. You go to Walmart and you're standing in this long line. Let's say it's Christmas, and you're standing in this long line for, say, 30 minutes to finally get up to the register. You get up to the register and about 20 to 25 people jump in front of you.
They don't even jump in front of you. They walk out the door with the stuff for free, and you're standing in line to pay.
Well, no, but they get in front of you after you've done and you've stood in line the whole time. Are you telling me you're not going to say one thing about that? I promise you that all of the people that criticize me for my position on how this border should be orderly versus not orderly, they would go crazy if they stood in that line and then got jumped in front of. You know, that would be the case. They'd be furious about that. And then going back to what you were saying about the COVID issues. So all we hear is we've got people yelling at us for not wearing 2 masks. We have people yelling at us for not social distancing, for whatever. And they harp on you. Oh, follow the science, follow the science. You know, this is the worst pandemic ever. People are dying. You do not care about people's health. And they're putting all of us on blast. But then when you look at this, millions of people trying to flood our border, trying to come through, there's no social distancing. Have you seen the pictures of how they're housing these people? They're all wrapped up like an aluminum foil. It looks like a human Chipotle place, you know? Yeah. I mean, everybody's wrapped up in aluminum foil. They're inches away from each other, if not touching each other. You can't maintain, mask protocols in there. One facility, I think they said it's got like 700 kids in this one little pod, this one unit. It's designed for 80. And there's 2 Border Patrol officers that are handling 700 kids. You're telling me that that's not a COVID crisis?
From my opinion, I don't care that they're not wearing masks. I don't care they're not social distance, because I don't really think that this is that big of a deal. But that's my personal opinion.
But the standards. But if you're going to have a standard.
Exactly. But what I'm saying is I think it's disingenuous to make the American public follow all these ridiculous protocols and guidelines and losing their business and being arrested for trying to open a pizza shop, like happened last week in New York, and have a gym and have all your money, $250,000 seized from your bank account in violation of these protocols. But yet you're not even going through proper steps to vet anybody, to do any testing, to even hand out masks, or you're handing out T-shirts, you're handing out political T-shirts, but that's about it. So
this is why it's so hard to take when the government gives you these mandates and tells you have to do this, you have to do this, and follow the science and all of these things that they put down on you. but yet you watch how they operate, and it's completely different. It's this double standard that just drives everybody crazy and makes everybody insane. And maybe that's by design. Maybe they want to frustrate us like that so that, we get so
Well, it's
angry.
like what we showed on the probably the second, I think, episode, when you've got Biden up there screwing around saying follow the science, and he's touching his cloth mask 4 times.
Right.
The CDC, the institute, it's not part of the government, but it makes the recommendations, which your government is actually following, is saying do not touch your mask. But he does it 4 times and then tells everybody else to follow the science and calls people Neanderthals and all this other crazy stuff. So it's like you said, they don't even take their own advice. It's always like, even in some of the White House briefings, when they thought the camera was off, they would take their mask off and run around. But they, freak out about everybody like this. But it's like, going back to the border, it's I mean, they won't even let cameras in. I mean, they're doing a gag order.
There's some interesting stuff on that. And that's kind of where my topic kind of wraps up is the news media coverage of this. These guys, okay, finally, I'm seeing some coverage of something that's somewhat negative to the Biden administration. And that is, it's killing these news media people to have to do that. Mm-hmm. But this story is so big. This story is so big that they can't not cover it. And it's got to be frustrating to them. They got to be torn, because at one point they've kind of lost a lot of their ratings after Trump got out. That was their cash cow.
Yeah.
He's out. There's no stories to report there necessarily. And now they've got this huge story that's just a total mess. And now they're being told nonstop bullcrap from this Jen Psaki lady, the press secretary or whatever. She is terrible. She butchers every one of those press conferences. And even the liberal news media looks at that and goes, come on, man. We can't buy it. You're just, this is a bunch of junk. They're not even buying it, and they want to cover it, and they're being blocked. And that's got to be frustrating for them.
I got to ask a quick question.
Yeah.
Did she legitimately say that wind was a factor in Biden falling 3 times running up the stairs to Air Force One?
Well,
I know she said they were difficult to navigate, but somebody actually, I think she said it was a windy day or something.
If the wind can blow over the most powerful man on the planet,
I'm not sure he's the most powerful man on the planet, but
anyway, but
blaming it on that.
Yeah. So she's doing a terrible job of these press briefings, but just think about the cover up that's going on with the news coverage and how they're trying to just make this go away, and how they're always trying to change the word. And they just say stuff like, the border, I've even heard them where they say the border's controlled. The border is, even I think Nancy Pelosi was saying it the other day. The border's under control.
Nancy Pelosi. He's always drunk.
We have a plan. There's always, we have a plan with, it's some political statement, and we're supposed to just accept that. Don't believe your lying eyes. You can see what's going on down there. Mm-hmm. But just think about this. Of course, this would not be happening under Trump. You would not be having this many people flooding the border and that type of stuff. You wouldn't have this border crisis going on. But let's just say that it did under Trump. How different would the news coverage be?
Oh, it would be. They would demand cameras inside every facility that's blasted. That they would have live feeds. CNN would replace their COVID counter with live feeds of all the cages. What are they called now? Pods.
It'd be impeachment number 3, 4, 5, and 7.
Oh yeah.
I mean, they would probably.
But you know what Trump would do if something like this happened? Mm-hmm. He'd go to the border and fix it. That's what he did.
Yeah. Well,
he already did it.
Joe Biden's not going to go to the border because he can't go down there. Think about this. He cannot go down there. How do you say Kamala Harris? I don't know the right way to say it. Harris is not going to go down there because if they need to maintain that distance, that plausible deniability to some degree, mm-hmm. because if they actually see that with their own eyes and then they get questioned about it, that's going to be tough because now they're going to have to own it. And that's a problem for them. So that's why they're not doing it.
Yeah.
But do you know who is going down to the border this Friday? I just heard Lindsey Graham and 18 senators are going down to the border. And he said, if they deny us access to anything we want to see, that they're going to shut down the Senate, that this is going to be like a major, major issue. And he wants to go everywhere and see everything that he can see. And he dares them to block him. What's
his position? Because his nickname used to be Lindsey Grahamnesty.
Well, I don't know. I'm 50-50 on Lindsey Graham, but
Yeah.
I'll take this. If he wants to do this, great. I'm 50-50 on Lindsey Graham. Sometimes I feel like if the political winds are blowing a different direction, he'll go that way. But if he can be a useful tool in this one, go for it.
Well, I'm just tired.
And it's not about politics. It really is about the humans. It's about.
Well, that's what I'm just about to say. I'm so tired of these little staged events like AOC standing at a fence at a parking lot crying, making it look like that. Or if Lindsey and his little cohort go down there to actually help these people, I'm all for it. But if they go down there for just political points or posturing or anything of that sort, just stop and let's because the true issue here are their kids, they're little kids, there's teenagers, I can't imagine that journey that they take. I think it's deplorable that they were in a sense invited or coerced to do that. But at the end of the day, there's human beings that are the effect of this, and they're treating them like cattle. They're treating them like very subhuman.
That just shows the political left's true disregard for human life.
Yeah.
And we could go into a ton of different areas of places of reasons of how they use people for their own political gain. And that's a topic for a whole nother show.
Yeah.
But this is just one example of how they use people for their own political gain. And it's sick.
But like you said before, if they were conservative and if they were Republican voters, would this be happening?
Oh, absolutely not. They'd shut that border. They'd build a wall.
So that's the root. That's the nucleus of this whole movement.
There's more to this than just, whatever's going on down there. There's a longer term plan. I mean, just like when they're trying to add DC as a state or Puerto Rico as a state, they want 4 more senators. It's ultimately leading to a total power grab and increased voters, but
it's not just increased senators. I think when I read somewhere that when a population increases by X amount of hundreds of thousands of citizens based on the census, which that's where they're trying to count illegal aliens as citizens or part of that census, is that state will get more money, funding, and have more Congress people represent them in DC and on the state level. And like in Washington,
the power grab I was talking about.
Yeah. And in the state of Washington, you have probably 3, I want to say, because they made it a sanctuary state. So you have 3 additional congressmen, women, whatever you want to call them, that are in Washington because of counting of illegal aliens.
That's the power grab part of it. Now, additionally, and we're going so long on the border topic, but this is probably the last thing I've got to say about that. But you got that power grab portion of it. But what you've also got is you've got cheap immigrant labor. And the government, when the government kind of teams up with big corporations and big business, and that's what you see, and that's what you also see in totalitarian states. That's what you see in dictatorships and that type of stuff. Like, say, Russia, you got the oligarchs and you got the government, and they're in cahoots together. They're never not going to be in power, and everyone else suffers. And they can say whatever they want and do whatever they want.
Yeah.
Well, big business in America, as we've seen, has gotten in with, big government. They are the power. The mom and pop shops don't really get a fair shake. Now you've got an agricultural crisis. How we feed all these people, and now here, if we close up the border and we don't have cheap immigrant labor, they would say, these soft people that have, grow up playing video games and stuff like that, are they going to go out there and work in the farm? They're not. How are we going to feed the world? And that's basically what we do. So there's more to it than that. It's human trafficking. It's power grab. It's cheap labor. There's so many components to this. And that's why I'm hoping, whether the Lindsey Graham and his team go down there and it is ultimately for political reason, but the outcome is that it sheds some light on this and blows this system up, and we get back to focusing on the kids and the people and the poor humans that are being affected by this. Maybe some good can come from it. But that's about all I have on the border stuff. We could talk about that forever, probably.
Yeah. Well, there's another big story that happened this week is the shooting in Colorado, which I predicted it. I put that there would be another shooting. I mean, there's multiple things that they want to divert attention from. Number one is the border, but number two is they want gun control. And so I think they'll do anything they can to promote that agenda, or to, I guess in up here, there was a shooting by a sex crazed guy in a Asian spa / brothel that I guess didn't get the traction. So something else happened. And, one of the things that I've been, passionate about is, gosh, this goes back to 2000, the early 2000s, is when you see all these school shootings happen, you wonder why in the world that would indeed happen. And the more studies that I did, you come across a common thread that all these have, and it's psychotropic drugs. Every single one of them. Going back to Columbine, they were on, I can't remember, it starts with a P, Paxil, I think it was Paxil. Then you go up to Ritalin. Then you go up to a lot of these other psychotropic drugs, which I've got some articles in here. In Ritalin, this is very interesting with the side effects. Because I used to have a physician's desk reference because I was looking into another drug, which we won't mention in here. But the side effects in the physician's desk reference of Ritalin are hostility or aggression, hallucinations, homicidal ideation, which is envisioning killing other humans, mania or psychosis, violence, abnormal behavior, cognitive impairment, involuntary movements, suicide risk or attempts, withdrawal reactions. I mean, that's on I think a level 2 psychotropic drug, which
how much, talking about drugs, whether it's those drugs or other narcotics, how much of that is coming across the border, and how big of a business is that?
Well, when you look at the top drug on college campuses before COVID shut them all down, it wasn't marijuana, it wasn't cocaine, it wasn't heroin, it was Xanax. They would chop it up and snort it. They would just abuse Xanax. But think about who benefits off of that.
Big pharma.
Big pharma. That's right. So there's an article that talked about a report called "The Psychiatric Drugs Create Violence and Suicide, School Shootings, and Other Acts of Senseless Violence." And this provides information on more than 30 studies that link antidepressants, antipsychotics, psychostimulants, mood stabilizers, and sedative hypnotics to adverse effects that include hostility, mania, aggression, self-harm, suicide, and homicidal thoughts. The 64-page report deals more than 60 examples of school and mass shootings, stabbings, and senseless acts of violence committed to those under the influence of psychotropic drugs. So there's a lot of prevalence of this, and we'll put some links below. But there's another study that actually this got picked up by Reuters and the LA Times, basically talking antidepressant drugs can cause violent behavior. And it was in a medical journal, PLOS Medicine, which found young adults between the ages of 15 and 24 were nearly 50% more likely to be convicted of a homicide, assault, robbery, arson, kidnapping, sexual offense, and other violent crime when taking the antidepressant than when they weren't taking the psychiatric drug. So there's a ton of evidence on this. As far as this will probably end up getting banned, to be honest with you, but I think it's important to cover because it always gets buried. It always goes back to race. It always goes back to the weapon. It always goes back to something other than the trigger, the true cause of that. And if you have a lot of these side effects that are documented that the FDA has to reveal on there, but they're covering that up as far as homicidal ideations and increased anger, fits of rage, all these things, which are included in that, you're giving that to tens of millions of people. You're playing with fire.
But, you go back to what do they typically assign the blame for shootings, for anything that has to do with a gun or a weapon? There's a certain template that the left has, and they're always looking for something to fit inside that template. It's basically like if you just have a hammer, everything looks like a nail. Mm-hmm. Well, the same thing's true with, and they're very patient. They'll go for decades and decades and decades, but every chance they get to link something to that narrative, to that template, they'll do it. And part of the template is that, guns are, should be banned. Guns are evil, just guns in general. They'll say, remember they used to say assault rifles?
Yeah.
Now they pretty much say assault weapons,
Mm-hmm.
because rifles is not, if you took away all the rifles, I don't think that would appease them. That wouldn't satisfy them, because at the end of the day, really it's handguns that cause most of the violence. So banning all the rifles, or even assault rifles, even if that's a good first step for them, they would love to see, okay, we've made some kind of progress. An assault rifle, if you look at, what looks like a military type rifle, that would be a good first step, but it's just a gateway to other things. They're never going to be satisfied until all the guns are banned or gone away, except for the ones that protect them.
Yeah, of course.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they're not going to disarm their security detail.
Right.
At all.
The other narrative is a lot of times about race or political ideology. They'll say, okay, well, this shooter was a white person. This shooter, they want to assign white supremacy to everything. Or they want to.
Well, that's what happened with the shooter the other day. They said white male, and then
which one?
The one in Colorado. They said Twitter blew up with what does all these have in common? White male, white male, white male.
And he did look white.
Well,
I actually thought he was white when I first saw him.
The problem with that is he was a Islamic Syrian terror sympathizer who hated Trump, was targeting Trump supporters. He was from Syria. Which who just bombed Syria 36 days ago?
Right. Yeah.
No one's talking about that.
No, I didn't. Yeah, I didn't even think about that, but you're right. I don't know if there's any linkage there, but in a Trump administration, you would instantly have linkage. You'd say, okay, well, he's bombed there and this is retaliation. But think about this, the guy did look white. When I first saw it, I said, oh, great. Here's, this fits the narrative. White guy doing a shooting. And like I said, let's preface that. Our hearts go out to everybody that was a victim of that senseless violence.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing good about that whatsoever.
Yeah, police officers were father of 7.
Yeah. Yep. Exactly.
I just wish we'd come as a common collective and say that was a murderer. That was a person that his heart is in the wrong place, whether it's from sin, from chemical imbalances, from chemicals that he's taking, and all be on the side of he committed a horrific act against humanity. He took the lives, the most precious thing that people have, away from 10 plus people. He took a father away from 7 children who was a police officer.
And he would have probably done that some other way, some other method.
When they banned guns in London, they're stabbing everybody in the back. They're running through with their vehicles and stuff.
When I was in London last time, there was memorials, flowers, pictures, everything like that of people that got run over on the bridge.
Yep.
And in other places, they'll drive around on motorcycles and they'll throw acid on people.
Mm-hmm.
An evil person is going to find some form of a weapon.
A bomb.
I mean, I think cavemen probably hit people with sticks. You're always going to have, if you have an evil heart, you're going to find a weapon.
Mm-hmm.
So what are you going to ban? I mean, you're going to ban kitchen knives, butter knives. You could stab somebody with a butter knife.
Sure. Yeah.
You can hit somebody with a chair.
And murder's already against the law.
Yeah.
So just because you say you can't use a gun to murder, you think that's going to stop murders?
No.
Or I don't know. I think it's awful. I think it's,
but it fits the narrative and it drives it. It's just one more reason. And this is where, if the left has total power and can vote anything they want through Congress or the Senate and get laws passed and the Constitution changed and all that type of stuff, because they have unfettered power, all you need is just a small enough reason why, and then you can ram whatever you want through. And this will be just enough justification to do it. Yeah. And that's, I mean, we know they say it in their campaigns. We know that that's what they want to do. That's what they plan to do. If people tell you, what their true character is and what their true nature is and what their true plans are, believe them.
Yeah. So I don't know if the shooter was on psychotropic medication. The toxicology report will tell us that. Hopefully we'll get that information. They're seeming to scrub a lot of stuff. his Facebook completely scrubbed everything that he has.
Shocker.
Immediately, because he had a lot of extremism on there, anti-Trump hatred. He had targeted 2 Trump rallies, as a matter of fact, but they're not going to ever put that in the public grasp. Thankfully, there's been a lot of people that have captured screen grabs before Facebook can do its cover up.
Well, if he was on psychotropic drugs and the news media doesn't report it, is anyone ever going to know?
No. And here's an interesting stat, is that in a non-political season, cable news, what does 70% of the revenue come from?
Probably pharmaceuticals.
Pharmaceutical drugs.
Yeah.
So are they going to let
of course not.
that cover that? Or
No.
they're going to say, hey, you cover this, and guess what? We're pulling our ad revenue.
Right.
We're going to cancel you. Cancel culture already has existed. Big Pharma is the one that did that. If you speak disparagingly or truthfully about the effects of our product, we're not giving you your funding anymore.
Well, and this goes to the heart of what this whole show is about, is critical thinking. It's like if you are just like a blind sheep walking around and you're not even thinking about all the different ways that people are incentivized or disincentivized, or they're leveraged, if the news media can't talk about this stuff because it hurts their bottom line, then you're not going to hear about it. And most people aren't going to do their own research. So you're left with that. So, but if you can't, as an individual, have critical thinking skills, you're just going to fall for whatever they put out there.
Yeah.
And I think that's what we don't want for people.
Well, part of this other report, the Citizens Commission on Human Rights, they came out with a link between violence and antidepressants. And it goes back to 1991, when they helped organize hearings before the FDA, where the victims and experts gathered to testify that selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors cause not only suicide, but violence, including homicide. The testimony by parents about the violent self-inflicted deaths of their young children was gut-wrenching, yet despite overwhelming data provided by experts and firsthand accounts of suicide and violence caused by antidepressants, the FDA Advisory Committee, many of which had financial conflicts, back to exactly what we're talking about, conflicts of interest with the pharmaceutical companies, refused to warn the public of the link between suicide and antidepressants. But in 2004, the FDA was again forced to address the issue. This time, though, the data provided by whistleblowers within the industry could not be shrugged off, and more than a decade after the federal agency first knew of the deadly consequences associated with SSRIs, a black box warning for suicidal ideation and behavior finally was issued on all antidepressants. Thank God. Yet the connection to violence and homicide continued to be ignored. To this day, despite 22 warnings on psychiatric drugs causing violence from international drug regulatory agencies, and despite the fact that at least 35 school shootings and or related acts of violence have been committed by those taking or withdrawing from psychiatric drugs, resulting in 69 wounded and 79 killed. The FDA has never issued black box warnings on antidepressant drugs causing violence. Again, it's
big business.
It's what they call the revolving door of big pharma. Mm-hmm. You have people that are in pharmaceutical companies and the C-suites, executives, that they'll leave there and they'll go into the FDA. And when a lot of people that leave the FDA who have made rules that affect big pharma and these companies, guess where they get to go? Mm-hmm. The FDA people go right back into big pharma. So it's literally a revolving door. The companies send people into the regulatory division to make the rule. Then they get to come back and reap the benefits of the rule that they made, which makes them big time.
It's probably the same with lobbyists as well.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it definitely is. Mm-hmm. So there's a whole connection to that. And I really wish people would step back a little bit and look at a lot of these shootings and what causes that, because the side effects of a lot of these drugs are incredible. There's actually one more thing that I was going to say, as far as there was a report that came out exposing the fraudulent research of GlaxoSmithKline's antidepressant Paxil. According to a review of the data used for the approval of the antidepressant, Paxil is not effective in the treatment of children, and there is a significant risk of suicide associated with it. Now, when you look at what's happening right now in our current culture, in our current world, suicide among young people are through the roof. And I know it's a lot of isolation and the effects of COVID, but probably, and we'll have to get this data as more come in, but I would imagine with the isolation that the increase of prescriptions for psychotropic drugs has gone through the roof. And when it says some of these psychotropics like Paxil increase the risk of suicide among young kids, start connecting the dots. It's an absolute disaster.
Yeah. And, obviously there's probably is some percentage of people on this planet that really do have chemical imbalances, and there could be some drugs that possibly help them manage that. That being said, I think they're so readily available and so easy to get and so often prescribed that some things that should be handled just personally, which, or through spiritually, to just get that character growth of dealing with difficult situations, working through them. That type of growth process just doesn't happen because it gets circumvented by a drug. It gets circumvented by a prescription, and you're shortchanging your ability to grow as a human being and to deal with problems. Then what happens when that drug's not available anymore?
Yeah.
Now what? Now you can't handle even the smallest crisis. And so I think that we've taken God out of the equation. God never told us that we would have an easy life, that we'd have a smooth life, that everything's going to be wonderful, work out perfectly on this planet. Ultimately, it'll work out. Maybe not, it'll work out in eternity, but it won't necessarily work out on this planet. We will have difficulties. It's not if you have difficulties, it's we will have difficulties on this planet. So that's part of life. That's part of our everything we have to deal with. So if we shortchange that and we take God out of the equation, of course we should expect that there's going to be issues.
Yeah. And when you don't make logical decisions, when you have a kid that just runs around and won't stop running around, but when you look at the diet and you're feeding them sugar, loaded with sugar, and they're required to stay inside, they don't have a lot of time to be a kid and to go and exert their energy and to be curious. I mean, kids are the most curious, incredible things around, and it's so cool to see what their curiosity can create and develop if they're allowed to do that. If they're not just stuck behind an iPad as kind of like a mind-numbed robot and just sit there and be drugged up, and it's heartbreaking for a lot of them.
I'm just so thankful for my own childhood and growing up years where we just got to go out and explore nature, and we'd go off for days. Sometimes we'd go off and we'd sleep in the woods, and we'd go fishing, and we'd make our own fires, and we'd cook things, and we would build forts up in trees and just everything. We just would explore.
Yeah.
And we got hurt sometimes, and we got, all messed up out there sometimes. I just about froze to death one time, camping out and that type of thing. Almost caught ourselves on fire because I decided to throw kerosene on top of a fire and about blew us both up, me and my buddy. But that's how you learn. Those are the experiences.
Yep.
And unless you get out there and you really just live life, you really have not had the full experience. And I just feel bad for these kids that are so cooped up and just stay inside all the time. You got to get out, and that fresh air is so good for you too, and that sunlight.
Well, when I was young, I was really active, and I don't say hyper. I was inquisitive. I was very curious about things, and kind of on a routine visit to, I guess, my primary care doctor as a kid, pediatrician, that he recommended that I may try, I don't know if it's Ritalin or not, to my mom. Said I had signs of ADHD, and she about lost it with that guy. She's like, he does not have ADHD. He's a curious child. And I'm very thankful that my mom did that, because she had the wherewithal to do the research and understand, and to not just drug me, because the problem with that is you get so chemically dependent as a child taking psychotropics, and it causes imbalances in your system to where when you're a little bit older, then you get on the medical merry-go-round. Then you have side effects that have to be masked with another chemical. And then you take that, which cause 5 or 6 additional side effects, which you've got to take that. So really what it is, it's a young recruiting effort for these pharmaceutical companies, because they know if they can get you on that for a long time, you're going to be one of the greatest customers for the rest of your existence. And
what's the worst thing?
Unfortunately, that's not a long time for a lot of these people.
What's the worst thing for a big pharmaceutical company? Is a granddad that was in the World War II. raising a kid.
Yeah.
Because my granddad, whenever I got to where I was being too unruly and he needed to put some discipline in my life, or I was too hyperactive or I was too crazy, he put me to work.
Yeah.
He made me dig holes or shovel gravel or work outside while he sat underneath the tree drinking a glass of tea, just mocking me because I was out there working. But he worked me to death. He said, "Boy, you got too much energy." He goes, "We need to burn some of that energy off." And he put me through it. And then I was too tired to complain about crap and be unruly.
Imagine what we would do if we had YouTube back in the day when we grew up. And I'm not talking about making a channel or anything like that. I'm talking about having access in your pocket to know how to pretty much do anything you want to do as far as building a fort, building a little go-kart, whatever you want to know how to do, like science experiments. I used to watch Mr. Wizard growing up and trying to recreate those a lot of times unsuccessfully. We had water balloon launchers. We would launch, of course, water balloons we were kind of tired of water balloons. And we started launching fruit and then golf balls. And
we shot each other with BBs and pellets.
I have a scar right there where we were supposed to do a 1-pump BB gun contest, and evidently my buddy didn't get the memo, and I got shot in my knee with I think he accidentally did 9 pumps, and the BB went in there, and I went home and I didn't tell anybody about it, and BB was stuck in my knee, and then it started to swell up and turn colors, and I had to tell my mom. I'm like, may have got shot,
but we survived. We survived childhood. We built our own ramps. We jumped things.
Yeah, we did.
We rode in the back of pickup trucks. We didn't wear helmets when we rode bikes.
In Florida, we had rope swings that went off into the phosphate mine pits that they fill up. And I'll never forget going off of those things and swinging off and letting go and looking out, and there's an alligator cruising probably 20 yards away. And you're just hoping that thing doesn't come. And I mean, they're not really aggressive unless you go try to get their little babies, which we may have done when we were young, but
allegedly
we never. Well, but that's back when you could buy them at the pet store. You could. I had a friend who had one in an aquarium. I never like to touch them. I don't like reptiles.
But anyway, I just think we've gotten soft as a society, and pharmaceuticals, going back to what you were saying, and creating possibly some unintended or maybe unintended consequences, but it'll probably never get reported. So that's where we are with that. Well, we covered a lot of topics today, and I don't know, we've gone back to politics, which last episode was all good news. And it was all good news except for the time when you talked about Horny Hank here.
Yeah,
and then you got a lot of hate mail. So
got a lot of hate mail.
That sort of prompted this
setup. That was fun. That was a funny time, and it was interesting. I'm glad Andrew. We were hoping he just repost the show, and then he repost that, and the deer got more.
The deer got all the attention.
The deer got all the attention. So yeah, we miss Whiskey the Wolverine today, so we're replacing with horny Hank there, But
I like this location, this remote location. Hopefully we get to do this again.
Yeah, it's like I said, it's one of my favorite places we can disconnect up here. And we actually had to intentionally go online to figure out stories, because up here, you just disconnect and you enjoy life, and there's good people around, and it's a good environment. It's
I was so relaxed and not even paying attention to politics.
Small town.
You made me pay attention to politics again.
All right. Well, that's just for the day, because after this, we're done.
Yeah, we're done.
We're done. We'll go back, sit in the front porch, and
enjoy the weather and grill out tonight.
Yeah, just love life in a good small town, and just enjoy the great outdoors, which he enjoyed the great outdoors for a long time. And the thing is somebody was saying, why do you have to mount the head? I'm like, because that's a beautiful animal. I mean, why would you throw it away? That's stupid. I mean, everything on this is used.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that he sacrificed some good meat, and we're honoring him with a nice statue of himself.
And it's funny, they don't often say that about bass. You ever notice that?
Yeah.
No, you probably wouldn't get near the hate mail if you mounted a bass. You ever notice that?
Yeah, of course.
The bass had a life too. Bass had a good life.
BLM, Bass Lives Matter.
Oh gosh. Yeah, you may have to edit that one out.
No, we're leaving
Bass Lives Matter.
Bass Lives Matter. Yeah, they do.
Well, I guess that's true.
That is true. I'm not sure. It's probably out of frame, but there's a pheasant hanging up there too. So pheasants' lives matter.
Yeah.
There's a little pheasant tail hanging. So
All
no,
right.
but I think we want to, we had to cover, some of these topics because I think that their relevance to what's going on with the border, and just to try to get people to look at, like when you're talking about some of these, Title 42 bills. And then when you have shootings, don't just take the mainstream narrative of white man gun bad. It's not that. There's all these connections that go back with it. The effects of psychotropic drugs on a variety of things, including when you're isolated, what that does in an already noted side effect and research side effect. When you combine that with isolation, it ups the ante. And then
the thing that upsets me the most, and this is really kind of, like I said, why I spend as much time as I did on this podcast talking about it, though, are the kids and the human lives that are being put in such danger as a result of this policy change, and this wink and a nod, like, oh, don't come, wink, wink, nod, nod, and then we're going to incentivize you for coming.
Yeah,
that is bad. That's terrible. And I don't even want to know really, truly the level of the atrocities that's happening to these people down here. And to all my friends that just think, we should have open borders and we should all, like, this is such a ministry opportunity. And why are we trying to shut down borders, that type of stuff. This version of immigration is way more harmful. The heart is right potentially about some of this stuff, but this policy and this form of immigration policy is way more detrimental to humans and destructive to humans and kids.
Well, I think the biggest detriment is you have the government fighting their own law. As far as when you have your immigration law, you have the government fighting and refusing to enforce its own law. So I think that that's the hardest part, because when you have a lot of these bad actors, they can do whatever they want, and the government's not going to enforce anything on that because that's against their agenda. And I've been all over the world in many countries, and I've seen the effects. We can get onto that in another one, but I've seen the effects.
You've seen the long-term effects of what happens. This is the short-term problem that leads to all these long-term issues, and basically the collapse of economies, the collapse of nations, and just humanitarian crisis inside of our borders now. And that's where it's going.
Well, I can say
we know where it's going.
There's tens of thousands of sex slaves in the United States right now. Before this border crisis happened, there's stories that you see as early as a year and a half ago of people being found that were kind of locked up in the basement and as sex slaves. This is only going to get worse.
Way worse
with the current crisis that we have, and it's going to get worse, and it's going to get younger. And again, I've said they're on the path to legalize pedophilia, and this is playing right into the hands of that. And it's heartbreaking.
And even going beyond this, how would you feel if you lived in a inner city and politicians keep telling you that they don't have enough money to fix all the problems that are in the inner cities and that type of stuff, and with American childhood poverty and that type of stuff, and the school systems, we don't have enough money for that, but we have all the money in the world to invite the entire world across our southern border. Just think, just use your mind and think, this is not correct.
Yeah.
What we're being told. And so I just hope people will have more of a critical thinking mentality going forward.
Yep, I do too. I do too.
Boy, we could talk about so many other things, but I want to stop thinking about politics. I want to get back to enjoying this awesome location.
Enjoying the good land the good Lord made. So, well, thanks for joining us today on Gabbers. I am Rusty Putfark. Follow me at Putfark, Puttfark on Gab. Follow Meme Joe at Meme Joe Green on Gab at MEME Joe Green. We got to have like a show where you do like memes. I think people are disappointed. We don't get a lot of feedback on the show, but I think if we ever did, feedback that I would give since I'm the only feedbacker, is I need to see Meme Joe memes.
Well, the funny thing about this platform with Gab is I think people like to see the memes, but that doesn't really evoke the emotion, more of the political stuff. And the reason why I post memes is because a little bit of sarcasm helps kind of break some of the tension. It can't be all anger, all outrage, all just negativity all the time. Yeah, great. We're all outraged. We're all mad about what's going on, but you got to throw a little sarcasm into it just to kind of break it up a little bit. And that's what I try to do there.
Yeah. Well, this has been like a church service. We tried to end it 3 times.
Yeah, I know.
In conclusion,
That's
3
right.
times. So
That's
we really will go. But thank you so much for joining us. And we look forward to joining next time. Again, follow us on the different platforms we're at. We're on Spotify. We're on YouTube. We're on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts. We're pretty much everywhere. So hopefully you can follow us. Give us your feedback. We're certainly open for that. I'm Rusty Putfark, Meme Joe Green, Horny Hank. We are going to go back and enjoy nature.